I went to see the GP. He asked why I was there, which wasn't a great start considering I'd made the appointment over the phone specifically to talk about PTSD and depression. So I gave him the spiel. Years ago, after a difficult event triggered a flash of memory, I realized I'd been assaulted at school. I wanted to talk about my insomnia. Since beginning my investigation into myself at the start of this year, I've routinely woken up at about 5 in the morning. For decades before that, it used to take me hours to get to sleep, so something had clearly changed. Then there are the spots on my hands, painful blister-like little eczema spots called pompholics that appear on my fingers and palms during periods of stress, and there was the burst ulcer from a few years ago, which may have been worsened by a year of increasing somatic stress. There are strong links between PTSD and gastrointestinal health through something called the gut-brain axis. It involves changes in gut microbes and the chemicals they produce, signals traveling through the vagus nerve, and stress hormones like cortisol screwing everything up in the body. That might also explain my ever-present constipation. Hey, it isn't a glamorous subject, but if you're experiencing the same, maybe all this will help. So, having remembered a few more things connected to school, I've realized I may have had depression for most of my life without consciously understanding what was behind it. I was at the doctor's because I wanted a diagnosis to explain the symptoms. He wasn't hugely helpful. I showed him some of the screenshots I take on my phone in the morning, recording the times I wake up. He asked me about my eating habits, and I said they were fine. He asked about my mood, and I told him I knew where he was going with this. Yes, I do sometimes think about hurting myself or worse, but no, I would never do it because I have a family to think about. Besides, I said, my wife would kill me. I went on to talk about how I could see the appeal of self-harming as a way to dull the emotional pain for a short time and replace it with physical pain, as that would be something I could control. However, understanding the reason for doing something isn't the same as intending to do it, which I don't. As I said, my wife wouldn't let me hear the end of it. He asked me how I thought he may be able to help, so I said I just wanted to know if I had PTSD and depression. I just wanted a yes or no. My wife was sure I did, as she's been there, and she watches me like a hawk in case I backslide. He said there was a questionnaire, but dismissed it on the basis that my answers might be different tomorrow. That confused me. My answer would be the same on any given day. These weren't passing feelings from a bad afternoon. They've been there for years and they're getting worse, and seem to have been there at a lower level for some considerable time. He was vaguely helpful in saying that medication could be used for stress, PTSD and depression, as the symptoms can overlap, but suggested that I wait to see how I felt over time. All I wanted was some movement towards answering the question, do I have PTSD and or depression? Something that explains what's been happening to me. I wasn't expecting a miracle in 10 minutes or to be diagnosed from a checkbox. I was hoping for an assessment or a referral, or at least a clear next step. Instead, I thanked him for his time and backed out of the room like the fawn I am, not wanting to cause a fuss. I wasn't hugely surprised. The doctor wasn't a mental health specialist, and the NHS is under enormous pressure. A recent Unison survey of more than 19,000 healthcare workers found that 85% had experienced workplace stress during the previous year, with many describing themselves as exhausted, overwhelmed, or at breaking point. I understood that. Perhaps I understood it too well. So instead of pushing for the assessment I had gone there to request, I immediately began worrying about becoming another burden on an overloaded system. It was the fawn response again, explaining away why somebody couldn't help me, then making myself smaller so I wouldn't cause trouble. Meanwhile, I've now been to the first of the group sessions I was offered. I didn't know what I was walking into at all. I half expected a circle of chairs like you see on TV, then taking it in turns to blurt out as much as you could about why you were there. But it wasn't that. It wasn't at all what I was expecting. It was actually really quite wonderful. Anonymity and confidentiality are understandably among the highest priorities at these sessions. What's said in the group stays in the group. Anyone attending is already stretching their ability to trust simply by walking through the door, and it would be a huge disservice to that bravery for me to identify anyone through description or by repeating what happened to them. That's the Cardinal Rule. If someone chooses to trust you with something that deeply personal and life-changing, you can't betray the faith they put in you. That's one reason I chose to tell my family, closest friends, and everyone at work instead of confiding in only one or two individuals. Nobody within those circles can accidentally spill the beans to someone else in them if they know everyone already knows. And carrying something this significant while being unable to discuss it openly puts a lot of pressure on people. That's the fawn response again, making myself more uncomfortable while trying to ease everyone else's discomfort and removing the possibility of someone making a mistake and then feeling bad about it. This way, nobody has to wonder who knows, what they're allowed to say, or whether they might accidentally reveal something they shouldn't. For better or worse, it's now all out in the open. Full transparency. Anyway, back to the group. Under UK law, someone who's reported or been identified as the victim of a sexual offence generally has a lifelong right to anonymity. Publishing anything that identifies them or is likely to identify them can be a criminal offence under the Sexual Offences Amendment Act 1992. I don't know what brought each person into that room, but their reasons for being there are private. Their stories belong to them, not me, so as I continue journaling, I'll be quadruple checking that nothing I say could reveal who they are. The experiences that brought some of us through that door may already have badly damaged trust in other people, so there was an understandable hesitation as a new group of strangers came together for the first time. A few of them had been to these sessions before, but even for them, this was a fresh start with an unfamiliar group, and beginning again was clearly emotional. We were welcomed in and asked to look through a series of pictures. The idea was that we'd pick one that meant something, and then later we went around the table saying what the image meant or represented to us. I chose a picture of a long straight road in a desert, maybe Route 66. I explained that for me it was showing the start of a long journey with no end in sight. I suppose I could have added to that. To me, the desert represented the despair I felt, the wasteland of my feelings, and that the road was a path to a destination so far away it was out of sight. I didn't add that, though, because looking around the table I worried that what I'd already said might have brought the mood down a little anyway. I spent probably the first 30 minutes trying not to cry as I looked around the table and spent the first hour just sniffing until I grabbed some tissues. Those of us that wanted to talk did, and those that didn't. The group was a diverse mix of ages and backgrounds, all brought together by the need for support. As I looked around the table in hypervigilance threat assessment mode, I saw people comfortable in their skin, or at least just putting on a convincing show. People looking openly anxious, and people just looking straight down in front of them as if they'd done something wrong. I spent a fair amount of time as one of the table starers. From what I could see, by the time we'd spent just an hour together, the meeting seemed to give everyone a bit more strength, a bit more confidence, a bit of their armour back. There were some laughs and some tears as we all grew a bit more comfortable around each other. I already know that the next session is going to feel a lot more comfortable, and I'm very much looking forward to it. If you're sitting on the fence about joining a group like this, I genuinely suggest taking the step and trying it. It's hard to explain how, but it partially restored my faith in humanity. At the doctor's, I'd explained almost everything and left feeling as though I'd got nowhere. At the group, I revealed almost nothing and came away feeling lighter. Perhaps being helped isn't always about finding the perfect words. Sometimes it begins with entering a room where nobody demands that you justify why you're there. I suppose that leads me on to how people deal with me since I told everyone. Contact has lessened, that's for sure. I guess people are trying to adjust to the new normal. Perhaps people don't know what to say. Perhaps they worry that asking how I am will produce an answer they're not equipped to hear. Whatever the reason, fewer people talk to me now. Maybe they don't want to be made unhappy, which I totally understand. Well, here's an idea. Maybe don't ask how I am. You already know how I'm feeling, and that won't change any time soon, so perhaps talk about something else? Perhaps just normal everyday conversation? Of course, there's a chance you get stung anyway. Shortly after my birthday, somebody asked me, "Did you have a nice birthday?" And I replied, "No, not really." They were clearly taken back by that, as for all the time they've known me, the conversations have mostly been light and breezy as I filtered everything through my mask. People don't like the answers with the mask off. It isn't what I meant to say. I was meant to have said, "Oh yes, it was lovely, thanks, didn't get up to much, went to the cinema, then back home to have some cake and relax." Which I did, but when I got home I put on an old favourite I hadn't seen for years, Flight of the Navigator. I knew the story, as I've watched it many times, but this time was very different. In the first half hour I burst into tears 3 or 4 times and hyperventilated through a whole scene. What I didn't realise until about a week after watching it is why. I googled Flight of the Navigator effect on CSA victim, and the AI response was that the film acts as an allegorical touchstone for childhood trauma and childhood sexual abuse survivors. The film's themes of lost time, sudden disorientation, memory fragmentation, and being alienated from one's own body deeply resonate with the psychological impacts of abuse. The parallels between the film's events and the lived experiences of CSA victims centre around several key areas. It only came up with Reddit posts for its sources, but it explained a few things. So I spent my birthday with nobody around me and felt very lonely and isolated the whole time. I accidentally triggered myself on what I previously thought was a nostalgic comfort film and spent a large amount of the day crying until my wife got home. On the plus side, it was better than last year, because last year I didn't know why I was crying. Now I do. Anyway, back on topic. Most people can't cope with the reveal. We're wired to seek out pleasure, not pain. Disclosure is definitely a double-edged sword. On one hand, I feel a weight has been lifted. Living with it on my own without telling anybody was eating away at me, and I was spiralling into an emotional vacuum. People would ask if I was okay, and I was having to rely on my slowly cracking mask to shield me and protect them from the truth. Now I'm on the other side of it, there are a bunch of people who talk to me less, or not at all, which is worse than if I'd said nothing. There's an article on the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault website talking about negative reactions following disclosure. Survivors may experience greater isolation, self-doubt and rejection, then retreat into avoidance, minimization, and silence because they begin to feel that their trauma is a burden to everyone else. And all of that is bang on. That's how I feel and where I am. Getting more isolated, resorting to silence again and saying, "Yeah, I'm fine," if asked how I am when it's hysterically untrue. The only person I can properly explain my thoughts and feelings to is my ever-supportive wife. People often avoid survivors because they're uncomfortable with pain. They don't know what to say. They worry about saying the wrong thing, or they may just lack the emotional capacity to process heavy trauma and they retreat out of self-preservation. I totally get it. Finding out about someone having been assaulted is a really big deal and can drastically adjust your relationship with that person. Instead of randomly chatting about everything and anything with them as you did before, you're likely to now just say, "Hi," and then walk past, not wanting to put yourself in the position to feel terrible for them. But when it happens to you, and you're the person on the receiving end of the high, it's almost worse than not having revealed anything in the first place. At least beforehand, people talked to you. Before, I almost felt like a spy, walking around with people having no idea who I really was on the inside. They only knew me by my disguise. But when you take the disguise off, it shocks people. Perhaps they don't want that someone that they know has been assaulted in their perception of reality. Perhaps they don't like the reminder, so they stay away, or stay quiet as they walk quickly past you. And meanwhile, for all the progress you make, every time that happens, it pulls you back a step. So I suppose what I'm getting at here is, should you tell anyone about it? It's a super difficult and really personal question, and there's no right answer. You need to find that person or those people that you know can handle it, are compassionate enough to become a support network for you, and who know you well enough to know that if you're strong enough to tell them, that you're strong enough to be yourself around them without wearing the mask. People who can hold that knowledge without it replacing everything else they know about you with that one thing. People who can support you without treating you like glass. I would say that a group like the one I've joined would be a fantastic idea. If you feel confident enough to find a local support group and they give you the option, take them up on it. No question. Perhaps that was why the group felt so different. Outside that room, people seemed frightened of what I might say if they asked how I was. Inside, nobody needed me to say anything at all. The people around that table didn't treat me like glass, avoid me in the corridor, or demand that I put the mask back on. They simply allowed me to be there. We all knew why we were there. We all accepted each other. We didn't need to ask, and we didn't need to wear masks. I'll put it this way. A friend messaged me for an update asking how the group session went. I replied, "Oh, hi, it was really good. I've written a bit about it into script 4. We didn't really talk much. We didn't need to. Everyone knew why we were there. It was enough to realize other people were on the same road and that we didn't need to feel so alone on it." So perhaps this wasn't the beginning of a new hope. Perhaps it was merely the opening title crawl. Either way, I had the opportunity to make a cactus out of air-drying clay during the practical session of the group meeting, and I'm going to give it to my wife.